Hey everyone, Scott here, and in today's video I'm going to be going over some card Q&As for the upcoming set, Supreme Rivalry, that I think you should know about. We're not going to be covering every single Q&A in this video, just because some of them I think are pretty self-explanatory. I had originally planned to do a sequel to this video that I made about the rules manual and its latest update. Having looked at the new version of the rule manual, version 1.19, it seems to mostly be minor wording changes, just to make things more clear, so there's not really a lot to talk about, or at least nothing that would make for a good video. So instead I decided to make this video where we'll look at some of the Q&As for the upcoming set instead. So first up we have a Q&A regarding these two cards here. So we have the new King Vegeta Leader on the left, and the Broly Secret Rare from set 11 on the right. And this is going to be in regards to the King Vegeta's second auto. So once per turn, when the power of one of your opponent's cards is decreased, choose one of your opponent's battle cards and it gets minus 10k power for the turn. And it's also concerning the permanent of the Broly Secret Rare. All cards in your opponent's leader, battle area and combo area get minus 5k power / combo power. So this is the Q&As here, there's two of them. So the first one is asking, if you play the Broly, does it trigger the second auto of the King Vegeta Leader? And the answer is yes, because you are reducing the power of one of your opponent's cards. At the very least, even if they don't have any cards in their battle area or the combo area, you're going to be reducing the power of their leader by 5k, and that will be enough to trigger the second auto of the King Vegeta Leader. And then the second Q&A there is asking, when you pass the turn with the Super Saiyan 4 Broly the Great Destroyer on board, does the second auto of the King Vegeta Leader trigger again? And the answer is no, that it doesn't, which makes sense because you're not decreasing the power of any of their cards again when you pass the turn. The effect of the Broly Secret Rare is basically continuous, so it doesn't get reapplied at the start of each turn. So at that point you're not decreasing the power has already been decreased, so the King Vegeta's auto would not trigger again. So next up we have this one-drop Bardock here on the left, and there's two Q&As to this guy, both in regards to his second auto, which is if your leader is a red Saiyan card and you have 2 or more energy. When this card deals damage by attacking, switch it to active mode, look at the top 7 and play up to 1 Bardock's crew with an energy cost of 1 among them. So basically the first Q&A is saying, if you give this guy double strike when he attacks, do you do the second auto twice? And the answer is no. With the way double strike works, it's not considered to be like a separate damage via attack, so it would not trigger the auto for a second time. And then the second Q&A is basically asking, if you give this guy critical, does the second auto still activate? And the answer is yes. Critical, all it really does is stop the card going from your opponent's life to their hand. It goes to their drop instead. So you are still doing damage, even if it is a critical attack. So there's no reason for the second auto of this card not to trigger, just because it has critical. So next we have a card Q&A for this Tora here, and this is a really interesting one. So this Tora has blocker bond 3, which means you have to have 3 red Saiyans and or Bardock crew cards in play for him to have blocker. So the Q&A is asking, if you have 3 Saiyan cards in your battle area, your opponent attacks and then KOs one of those cards, can you still activate the blocker skill on Tora? And the answer is yes, you can. So when it's talking about attacking with a card and then KOing with a skill, I'm assuming it's referring to something like this Oceana Shenron here that has the auto of when it attacks you can switch one of your opponent's battle cards to rest mode. If it has an energy cost of 2 or less, then you KO it. So I'm assuming that's what it means, not just that they attack and then later they KO a card with a skill. I'm assuming it's a skill that specifically triggers when the card attacks. So this Oceana Shenron would be an example of that there. And I've got 2 sections of the rule manual here that I think will explain why you're still able to activate blocker on the Tora even if one of the cards you need for bond 3 is KO'd. So at the top there we have 711, and that basically says that the trigger condition for blocker happens at the same time as when this card attacks autos, or when this card is attacked autos. So basically the trigger for blocker is at the same time as the trigger for the Oceana Shenron's auto. And then down there we have 1041. And the important thing about that is blocker is an auto keyword skill. So basically when it comes down to it, when your opponent attacks with something like this Oceana Shenron, their auto would trigger and the blocker for Tora would trigger it both at the same time. Then, because the person attacking with the Oceanus is the turn player, their auto would resolve first, so they would get to switch something to rest mode and then KO it. And then the auto on the Tora, which in this case would be blocker, would then be able to be activated. It's already triggered, but triggering and activating are two separate things, so you're able to choose if you want to activate the blocker on the Tora then by switching him to rest mode and then redirecting the attack to the Tora. So I think that is the explanation of why you're able to block with the Tora even if one of the cards you need for Bond 3 gets KO'd before you actually switch him to rest mode with blocker. A little bit further down in the card Q&As there is basically the same question again for this Son Gohan. It also has Bond 3 which gives him blocker, and it's basically asking the same thing: if one of your Saiyans gets KO'd, can you still activate blocker? And the answer is yes, you can, same as with the Tora. So next up we have this Super Saiyan Son Goku, and again this is another card Q&A asking about Bond 3. So the Goku has an active main Bond 3. If your opponent has 3 or more energy, this card gets plus 21k power until the start of your next main phase. So as long as you have 3 cards in play, you can do the active main of this Goku. And basically the Q&A is asking if one of the cards you need for Bond 3 gets KO'd after you've activated this skill, does the Goku retain that power increase? And the answer is yes, that it does. Bond 3 is only necessary for you to activate the active main skill. Once it's had its power increase, that is not going to go away just because one of your cards for Bond has been KO'd. So next up we have a Q&A about the way these two cards interact with each other. This Son Goku and the field card Young Invaders. So Young Invaders has an auto that says if your leader is a King Vegeta BR card, at the start of your opponent's turn, play up to 1 red Saiyan card with 500 power from your deck to your opponent's battle area. Then you shuffle your deck, and if you played a card, you can't play battle cards that aren't red Saiyans for the turn. So you can use the auto of the Young Invaders field card to play this Son Goku Hope of the Saiyans from your deck into your opponent's battle area. And then the auto of the Goku would trigger, which is when it's played, it's switched to rest mode. So this is the Q&A here, and it's specifically referring to the Son Goku Hope of the Saiyans. And the question is this: you play this card using Young Invaders auto skill. When this card gets switched to rest mode by its auto skill, does it switch to active mode during the charge phase? And the answer is yes, it does. Because the Goku gets played into your opponent's battle area at the start of their turn, that is before the point in the charge phase in which they switch all their cards to active mode. The way it works is this: the Goku gets played into your opponent's battle area, its auto triggers, switching it to rest mode, but then the part of the opponent's charge phase happens where they switch all the cards in their battle area, unison area, leader area, and energy area to active mode, and that would include the Goku. So basically this means that they can then swing at you with this Goku if they want to, or they could combo with it, I believe, as well. So yeah, this is just something you need to be careful of if you are going to be playing the King Vegeta Leader with this Young Invaders field card. So next up we have a card Q&A about the interaction between these two cards. We have this new Bujin, and he has counterattack that says if your leader is a Bojack Brigade card, negate the attack and play this card. If you activated this card's counterattack skill from your energy, place the top card of your deck in your energy in rest mode. If you have this Bardock, Might of the Resistance, in play, he has a permanent that says you can only play mono yellow Saiyan cards. And so the card Q&A is asking, if you have Great Ape Bardock, Might of the Resistance in play in your battle area, if you activate this card's counter-attack skill from your energy, will it be placed in its owner's drop area? And the answer is yes, it will be. So I can see why they felt it was necessary to make this card Q&A, because I could very much see somebody thinking that if they had the Bardock out and they activated the Bujin from their energy area, that it would negate the attack and then just stay in their energy area, but then they would also get to put a card in their energy area. That is not the case. Basically, with counter skills, if it's a battle card and then there's any kind of effect that stops it from coming into play, it would go to the drop area instead, unless the skill specifies an area. So, for instance, if you used God Stealing Technique against this Bujin, it would go back to the hand, and you would still get to put a card from the top of your deck into your energy area in rest mode. But like I say, if you have any other kind of skill that prevents a battle card from coming into play, part of its counter skill, counter attack, counter play, whatever, it will go to the drop area if it's not able to come into play. So next up, we have 2 Q&As about the new Chilled Leader. So the Chilled Leader himself has a permanent that says, all of your Chilled Army tokens gain the following effect. Permanent, this card gains Chilled's Army. Basically, the first Q&A is asking, are your Chilled's Army tokens still considered to be skillless cards if you are using this Chilled Leader? And the answer is no. They have permanent skills, so they are treated as cards with skills. For instance, if you wanted to use this Shenron Unison, and it's +1 to choose one of your skillless battle cards and give a double strike. If you're using this Chilled Leader, you are not able to choose a Chilled's Army token for the +1 of this Unison, because they are no longer considered to be skillless cards because of the permanent they gain from the leader. So that is something you need to be aware of if you were thinking of doing a skillless kind of build with this Chilled Leader. And so the second Q&A is referring to the Chilled Leader's active main, which is active main once per turn, pay 1 green. Choose up to 2 of your Chilled's Army cards, and they get plus 5,000 power, and revenge until the end of your opponent's next turn. So that's what his active main does, and you may notice that the Chilled Leader himself has the Chilled's Army special trait, so you could choose him as one of your targets for that active main effect, to give him plus 5,000 power and revenge until the end of your opponent's next turn. The second Q&A there is basically asking, if you do that and you give him revenge and the boost, if your opponent attacks it with a battle card, does the revenge skill activate? And the answer is no, that it doesn't. Revenge only activates when it's on battle cards and unison cards. Revenge doesn't activate on leaders. Otherwise, this would be pretty overpowered if you could choose your leader, give it revenge, and then anytime your opponent attacked into it, you'd just KO whatever they attacked with. So that makes sense. You might still want to use the plus on the Chilled Leader himself anyway, just for that extra 5k power. So basically to make your leader a 20k power leader for the duration of your opponent's next turn. So that is something that if you plan on using this Chilled Leader, you need to know. So next up we have 2 Q&As about this card here, Cooler Vicious Ambush. And you can see there that he has an auto, 1 green if your leader is green. When you activate a green extra card, play this card from your hand, and you can't play copies of the card for the turn. So these Q&As are both in regards to that auto skill there. So the first question says, you activate the second active skill of Unstoppable Invasion from your drop area. Does this card's auto skill activate? And the answer is no, it doesn't. So let's look at what the actual second auto of Unstoppable Invasion actually is. And it says, when this card in your battle area is placed in its owner's drop area by one of your skills, choose up to 1 of your opponent's unisons and remove a marker from it. If we look again at the auto of the Cooler, it says when you activate a green extra card. In this case, activate does not mean use a skill on the card. It means to actually activate the card by either paying its cost from your hand or using a skill that activates the card from another area. So using an auto on an extra card is not the same as activating it. So for instance, if we look again at Unstoppable Invasion, if we pay this card's energy cost from our hand to activate it and place it into the battle area, that would trigger the auto of this cooler. But the second auto of putting it in the drop area from your battle area would not be considered activating the card for the purposes of this cooler's auto. So that's just one thing you need to keep in mind. And then the second Q&A for this cooler says, you use Berry Blue Frieza Advisor's active main to activate a field skill from your drop area. Does this card's auto skill activate? And the answer is yes, it does. So if we look at the Berry Blue there, we look at her active main. So it's once per turn and 1 green if your leader is a King Cold BR card. Activate 1 mono green extra card with an energy cost of 2 and the field skill from your drop area. So in this case, the Berry Blue's activate main specifically states that you are activating the extra card from the drop area. So that would trigger the auto of this cooler. So that is the main difference there. In the first case, you're not technically activating the card, you're activating a skill on the card. With the second Q&A, you are specifically, because of the skill, activating the card from your drop area. So that does trigger the cooler. So that's just something you need to keep in mind if you're going to be using the new King Cold Leader. So next up, we have a Q&A regarding this card here, another one of the King Cold BR cards. It's King Cold's Dynasty. Originally, I wasn't going to bring this one up, but it did come up actually in one of the group chats that I'm in. If we look at the first permanent of the King Cold Dynasty there, it says if your leader is a green King Cold BR card, you can place any number of mono green extra cards with the field skill in your battle area. And this is the important part here. And your mono green extra cards with an original energy cost of 2 and the field skill don't cause any of your other extra cards with the field skill to be placed in their owner's drop area. So again, the important part of that is that it's mono green extra cards with an original energy cost of 2 and the field skill. So if we look at the question there, it says this card is in your battle area when you activate a field skill with an original energy cost of 1. Is this card placed in its owner's drop area? And the answer is yes. It is, and your other field cards, besides the one you activated, are all placed in their owner's drop areas. So basically it's saying if you want to use a card like Frieza Army Healing Pod, because it doesn't have an original energy cost of 2, it would cause all your other field cards to be placed in their owner's drop area. So King Cold's Dynasty and any other field cards you have out would all go to the drop area, and you'd be left with just Frieza Army Healing Pod in terms of field cards in your battle area. So that is one thing you need to know, is that you can't use other field cards within the King Cold's BR archetype. You have to stick to the ones that are mono green with an original energy cost of 2. So that also means if you want to use a 2-cost field card that is more than 1 color, I think Cell Games Arena, something like that, I think is the name of it, is a green-yellow extra card with an energy cost of 2 and the field skill. That would not be able to be played either. It's only mono green extra cards with an original energy cost of 2. So next up we have another Q&A for actually one of the cards we looked at earlier, Unstoppable Invasion. And the question is basically, this card is in your battle area when you activate a field card from your hand. When this card is placed in its owner's drop area, does its auto skill activate? So basically this is talking about the second auto that we looked at before, that says when it's placed in the drop area by one of your skills, remove a marker from your opponent's unison. Basically this is asking if you activate a field card like, for instance, Frieza Army Healing Pod that we just looked at, and that causes this card to go to the drop area, does its second auto trigger? And the answer is no. Playing another field card to replace this card does not count as removing it from your battle area with a skill. There are cards specifically within the King Cold BR archetype that let you put your field cards in the drop area. You have to use one of those skills, not just simply play another field card that would replace it. So that's something you might want to think about if you were thinking of running this Unstoppable Invasion field card in a non-King Cold BR deck, for instance. maybe you wanted to run it in a deck that is already running Freezer Army Healing Pod as just a way to get rid of a marker from your opponent's unison, that would not work. It has to be placed in the drop area by a skill that specifically lets you put a field card into the drop area, not by simply playing another field card to replace it. So next up we have a card Q&A about this new yellow Gohan future leader. And this Q&A is going to be specifically, again, regarding its second auto. And that reads, choose one of your mono yellow Trunks future cards. When your opponent attacks, switch a chosen card to active mode and it gets plus 6k power for the turn. Then you negate the skill for the turn. And the card Q&A is saying, this card is attacked and you use its skill to choose a Trunks future card with blocker in rest mode. Can you activate the chosen card's blocker skill? And the answer is yes, you can. Now, I think this goes back to a similar thing that I was talking about earlier with the Tora and his blocker skill. So let's say you had this Gohan leader out. You had a Trunks future in rest mode with the blocker skill. When your opponent attacks, the second auto on this leader would trigger, as well as the blocker on the rest mode Trunks future card would also trigger. And then because you have two autos that have triggered at the same time, you get to choose the order in which they resolve. So you use the second auto of this Gohan future leader to switch the Trunks to active mode, and then you can activate the blocker on that card to switch it to rest mode and redirect the attack to it. I believe that is the explanation for how this works, how you're able to activate blocker on a card that was in rest mode when your opponent attacked. I believe it's because you have two autos triggering at the same time and you can choose the order. If I'm wrong on that and you think you have another explanation of how this works, let me know what it is in the comment section down below. I would like to know if I have that right or not. But really the most important thing to take away from this video is that this works. If you have a Trunks future in rest mode with blocker, you can switch it to active mode and then activate the blocker skill on it, as can quite clearly be seen from this Q&A here. So next up, I wasn't necessarily going to cover it, but there are a lot of cards that basically have the same Q&A listed over and over again. It's part of the new yellow androids archetype from the upcoming set. So I'll just cover this one here with the leader, and just know that there are other cards that have basically the same thing that also have their own separate Q&As, but it's literally the same question and answer every time. So this Android 17 and 18 Harbinger of Calamity leader has an activate main that says, once per turn, choose one of your yellow Android battle cards and switch it to rest mode. Choose one of your opponent's battle cards in rest mode and negate its skills for the turn. So as I say, a lot of the yellow Android cards from the upcoming set have skills like that, where you have to choose one yellow Android battle card and switch to rest mode. And the Q&A is basically saying, can you choose a card that is already in rest mode to activate this skill? And the answer is no, you can't. Because if you look again at the activate main there, the part that says choose one of your yellow Android battle cards and switch to rest mode, and then there is a colon there. Anything before the colon is a cost. So the cost of activating this activate main is to choose one of your yellow Android battle cards and switch it to rest mode. So if you don't have any Android battle cards in active mode that you are able to switch to rest mode, it means you cannot pay the cost to activate the skill. Therefore, you cannot get the effect of, in this case, choosing one of your opponent's battle cards in rest mode and negating its skills for the turn. If you're not able to pay the cost, you don't get the effect. So the next Q&A we're going to look at is for the Supreme Code Time Leader. There's actually a lot of Q&As for leaders in this set. Is one thing I've noticed putting this video together. And this Q&A is specifically referring to the second activate main skill on the back side of the Supreme Code Time Leader. And so I'll read that to you there. It says activate main once per turn. Place one card from your life in your drop area. So that's the cost to activate this activate main skill. So the effect of that skill is then to place up to 2 black battle cards from your warp in your drop area. Then we have a semicolon, which basically denotes that you then do the rest of the skill as well. And the rest of the skill is battle cards you play using Overrealm aren't sent to your warp at the end of the turn. So then if we move over to look at the question part of this Q&A, it says you activate this card's second activate skill. Later that same turn, your opponent uses the active Battle of Heroine's Legacy to gain control of a battle card played using Overrealm. Does that card still get sent to its owner's warp at the end of the turn? And the answer to that is yes. Now this is actually, when we look at this Q&A, this is one that I wouldn't necessarily have thought would work this way, which is why I wanted to bring it to your attention. I'm not 100% sure why it goes to the warp at the end of the turn, because if you look at the way the skill is worded, it says battle cards you play using Overrealm aren't sent to the warp at the end of the turn. Now, your opponent just simply gains control of the card. It's still a card that you played with Overrealm. So actually, this is one that I don't quite get why this works this way. If you know, by all means, leave a comment down in the comment section below this video and let me know, and I'll pin it so that anyone else who comes to watch this video would get an explanation of how this works. I do have a theory as to why it would work this way, but I'm not 100% confident in it, so I don't want to put it out there just in case I am wrong. I don't want to be spreading like misinformation with this video. But again, the important thing to know is that this does work if you gain control of a card that your opponent who's using this Supreme Card time played with Overrealm, then it will go to the warp. Again, like I said, I'm not sure why it works this way. The important thing for you to know is that it just does work this way. So we come to the final Q&A that we have for this video, and it is an interaction between these two cards here, the new Mechikabura Leader and Burnished Bonds Burgos. It's in regards to Mechikabura. It says it's your turn and your opponent has Burnished Bonds Burgos in play in their battle area. When you use this card's Wish skill to switch energy to active mode, does Burnished Bonds Burgos' second auto skill activate? And the answer is yes, it does. So basically what this comes down to is that Wish is a non-awakened skill, and as part of that skill you can switch up to 1 year energy to active mode. So if your opponent has a card like Burnished Bonds Burgos out, I know there's ones in other colours as well. I think there's like a yellow Whis one, a green Cami one, and I think the red ones are Raditz. They have basically the same second auto about switching cards to active mode using non-awakened skills. So that's something important you need to know with this Mechikabura Leader. If you're planning on using it, like I am planning to be using this Mechikabura Leader next set. So this is something I'm glad that I've seen and that I know, that Wish is not considered to be an awakened skill, so therefore if I use it to switch energy to active mode while my opponent has one of these guys out, their skill will activate. So obviously with it being switch up to 1, if your opponent has one of these out, you just choose 0 and you don't switch any energy to active mode, and then you do the rest of the thing, flip your leader over, draw a card. So that's an important thing you need to know. And so that's it for this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching.